Now, just to give you a little background on this building, which is located on 125th Street in Harlem, USA. The building was built in 1914, and when the building was first built, it wasn't called the Apollo Theater as we call it right now. The building was originally called Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater. Again, the building was called Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater. This was a burlesque house. You know, da-da-da-da, boom, da-da, yeah. Okay, it was a burlesque house. Not only was this a burlesque house, but imagine this, contrary to what most people think, from 1914 when the building first opened up until 1934 when it was called Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater, at that time, this was an all-white theater. You see, black people were not allowed to come in here back then. We weren't allowed to come in. It wasn't because certain people didn't want us in here. See, that wasn't the case at all. The real reason that we weren't allowed in here back then is because during the turn of the century, here in New York, and in particular, this area called Harlem, at that time, we were all separated. Separated depending on where your ethnic group lived and was located. For instance, the west side of Harlem was for our Irish brothers and sisters. That was their area only. The east side of Harlem was where our Italian and Latino brothers and sisters, that was their area only. Now, all of Central Harlem, where the Apollo Theater is located, and this whole area, Central Harlem, was where our Jewish brothers and sisters lived. African Americans, we weren't in Harlem in large numbers back then as we are now. African Americans were located further downtown in Lower Manhattan, down near the World Trade Center area, down near New York City Hall, and even in certain parts of Central Park. But in the mid-1930s, burlesque was outlawed in the city of New York, particularly by the mayor. His name was Fiorello LaGuardia. He went on this campaign to shut down all the burlesque houses in New York City. He started in Lower Manhattan. Then came up to Midtown. You know those movie theaters on 42nd Street? Well, they were once burlesque houses, but he shut them down. Then they became vaudeville houses and show houses. And then they came up to Harlem. They started shutting down all the burlesque houses in Harlem, including this building where we are right now, which was originally called Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater. And when it was shut down in the mid-1930s, new owners bought this building in 1934. It was Mr. Sussman, Mr. Cohen, and my dear friend, Mr. Frank Schiffman. Now, the reason why I say he was my dear friend, and imagine, he bought this building in 1934, is because Mr. Frank Schiffman later on became one of my mentors in the mid-1960s when I started coming here to run errands for all the people who performed here. So just going back. So they came here and bought this building in 1934, and the new owners who bought it, they not only promised never to bring burlesque in here again, but they also decided to change the name of the building. So in 1934 was when this building's name was changed from the original name of Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater to the Apollo Theater. And you say, well, what does Apollo have to do with this theater in Harlem? Well, in Greek mythology, for all you students out there and all you scholars, in Greek mythology, Apollo was the Greek god that represented the sun and music and poetry and entertainment and healing. And those were the elements that these new owners wanted to bring to this building in 1934. And that's why they named the building the Apollo Theater.